Hi, it's Mark Bosser from Top Local Lead Generation. We're here with Paul Toffoli. He's an award-winning realtor in Vancouver. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm great, Mark. Thank you very much. Yourself?
I'm good. We're talking about sort of the getting into the nitty-gritty. We're making deals. So making and negotiating an offer. What are the ins and outs? How does a realtor help me with that?
Sure. And I think this is where it starts getting, as you said, into the nitty gritty. Um, we've looked at properties. We've sorted the gems out from the chaff, or the wheat from the chaff, to mix some metaphors. Um, and finally, we've come to one that we're like, you know what? This is a property that I would like to own, or that my client would like to own. And so now it comes down to the contract work. And this is a legal contract. It's binding. It's a big deal. It's not something that you want to do lightly. So what I do with my clients is I always like to be prepared. I make sure that, you know, as we're going through the process, I give them a blank copy of the contract along with some suggested subject and terms, just to make sure they're familiar with it before we get to that stage of drafting an offer, which may have to be done in the heat of the moment. It may be hurried. It's just always better for a buyer if they're comfortable with that contract and have seen it ahead of time. So, and the contract form that we use is a standard form contract that is created by the Real Estate Board and by the Law Society of BC. This contract has been in use for, in different forms for probably 30 plus years. And it's always updated annually as to new, quirks and definitions and so forth. But it's something that we can be very comfortable with. 90+% of all residential purchases and are done with this contract. So what it stipulates is, very straightforward. Buyer's name, seller's name, property address, property legal description, property identification number or PID, and then the terms. So some of the things that obviously we know are negotiable: purchase price, amount of the deposit, which in our marketplace is typically around 5% of the purchase price, and it's typically payable upon subject removal, though it is negotiable as to sometimes it can be payable upfront, fully refundable, or a portion of it can be payable upfront. But the standard practice right now is about 5% of the purchase price upon removal of all conditions. Then what about completion dates, which is when you pay your money and the title transfers, and the possession date, which is usually either the day after or a couple of days after, depending on what's going on with the seller. Are they buying another property, and so forth. And then the adjustment date, which is when you adjust property taxes. If there's strata fees, when do they get adjusted? Who pay? Utilities, all that type of stuff. And then what's included. So in our marketplace, again, in the standard contract, anything attached to the walls is included in the purchase of the property. Well, that includes blinds, but does it include the drapes? What about appliances? All those things, we just have to make sure that we cross the T's and dot the I's. Another one that sometimes is forgotten, maybe that shed in the backyard or the play palace in the backyard. These are things that you don't want to forget. So those are included items. We also talk about subjects, so conditions prior to purchase. So it's typically going to be subject to financing, subject to inspection, subject to strata documents if it's a strata, subject to title search, subject to property disclosure statement. All of these things are going to be put in, and then we negotiate not only what are those subjects, but how long do we have, how long does the buyer have to go through? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? The more complicated, the longer. So those are all things that we have to put in the offer, and those are all negotiable items. The seller will want those dates shorter. The buyer may want those dates longer. So working through all of those items when we're drafting an offer. And so, as I said, always better if my clients have that contract in front of them prior to us making an offer, so that they've already learned the things that we can learn, and all we have to deal with is what are we going to put in those items that are negotiable. So it just simplifies the process and makes it a little less stressful.
So it sounds like it's a fairly convoluted, complex kind of situation with a lot of information that you need to be aware of. And that's where an experienced hand can really help guide you and make sure you don't miss anything. Is that right?
It's absolutely true. You want to make sure you're dealing with somebody who's been through this before, because it's easy to make a little mistake that can end up costing thousands of dollars, or lose you the property, depending on what the situation is.
Right. So we've been talking with Mr. Paul Toffoli. He's award-winning realtor in Vancouver. You can reach him at his website, toffoli.ca, or give him a call, 604-787-6963. He'll look after you. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Mark.